It's late April 1945 in the pine forest near the village of Halbe, southeast of Berlin. A column pushes west between the trunks, thousands of men packed close together and among them boys of 16 and civilians shoving handcarts ahead of them. Above their heads, Soviet artillery combs the forest in a steady, methodical sweep. Anyone who falls stays where he lies. Somewhere in that stream are the remnants of a division that had existed for less than 3 months. A division that carried its name like a promise from the regime that had created it, 30. Januar. That date stands for the 30th of January 1933, the day Adolf Hitler became Chancellor, the day it all began. And now, that same spring, a unit named after that beginning was being destroyed at the exact moment the regime itself was collapsing. This is the story of the 32nd SS Division and of what was left of the Waffen-SS in its final weeks. We go back to the end of January 1945. At the SS training ground, Kurmark, near Liberos in Brandenburg, the SS leadership main office issued the order on 26 January to raise a new division. Within a few days it existed on paper. The plan was a motorized unit at first, a Panzer Grenadier division. There was no fuel left and there were no vehicles, so the division was equipped on foot and with horses, and from then on it counted as an ordinary Grenadier division. The honorary name pointed back to the day Hitler took power 12 years earlier. It was propaganda at a moment when there was almost nothing left to celebrate. There were no volunteers left by early 1945, so the Reich scraped the 32nd together from whatever still drifted behind the front, instructors and cadets from SS schools, recruits who had only just arrived, men on front leave who could no longer reach their old units, training and replacement battalions, an artillery regiment from Prague, a pioneer battalion from an engineer school near Prague. A large share of the men were boys aged 16 to 18 with barely any training. A third regiment came together only in March, with difficulty partly from policemen and Volkssturm. The division never reached full strength. At its peak it numbered around 12,000 men. The 32nd was more than an empty shell of raw recruits. Its corps, Regiment 86, had a past. It was Kampfgruppe Schill and it had already fought a war in the autumn of 1944. That war happened in the mountains of Slovakia against the Slovak national uprising. In August 1944, Slovak soldiers and partisans rose up against a regime in Bratislava that was allied to Germany. The SS crushed that uprising and Kampfgruppe Schill was one of its spearheads. Schill was the first German unit to enter the insurgent capital Banska Bystrica on October 27, 1944. Following in Schill's wake came Einsatzkommando 14, a killing unit of Einsatzgruppe H. While Schill did the fighting, that squad behind it carried out the largest massacres on Slovak soil, including the mass murders at Kremnička and Nemeka with more than 1,000 victims between them. During and after the uprising, German forces burned roughly 90 villages to the ground, murdered thousands of civilians and resumed the deportation of Slovakia's last Jews. That matters, and it is worth holding on to. The boys who died in the forest near Halby in April 1945 belonged to a division whose hardcore had served as an instrument in one of the cruelest chapters of the occupation. The 32nd was a unit of children and a unit with blood in its foundations at the same time. You can see how unsteady the whole thing was in its command. In roughly 3 months, the division went through 4 different commanders. The first was Johannes Mühlenkamp, an experienced panzer commander from the Wiking division, who held the post for less than a week. After him came Joachim Richter, Adolf Ax, and finally Hans Kempin. None of them stayed long enough to forge it into a real fighting unit. From February, the division went into the line, first in scattered pieces and then as a whole. It ended up on the Oder, south of Frankfurt an der Oder, near Fürstenberg and Vogelsang. There it faced a Red Army that outnumbered it endlessly in men, tanks and guns. On the 12th of April, the division was moved to the area around Salo as Army Reserve. On the 16th of April 1945, the Red Army opened its great offensive against the Silo Heights, the last natural line of defense before Berlin. The German front broke. With that breakthrough, the entire 9th Army under General Theodor Busse was cut off, with the 32nd SS Division inside it. After that, events moved fast. The 9th Army, together with hundreds of thousands of men and civilians, was trapped in a steadily shrinking pocket in the Spree Forest, southeast of Berlin. Estimates run from 150,000 to 200,000 people in that pocket, soldiers and refugees mixed together. Bussy chose to break out westward, away from the Soviets, towards Walter Wenk's 12th Army and then the Elbe. The goal was no longer to win, the goal was to reach the Americans before the Russians got hold of you. On the night of 28 to 29 April, the remnants of the division broke out of the Halbe pocket along with the rest. What followed was one of the bloodiest and least known battles of the entire war. The columns had to fight through 3 Soviet lines under unbroken artillery fire, across forest and marsh. Discipline collapsed, units fell apart, and the heaviest losses fell on the rearguard covering everyone else. Estimates of the German dead vary and run into the tens of thousands, with thousands of civilians killed on top of that. At the Halbe Forest Cemetery today lie around 20,000 dead, the largest war cemetery in Germany from the Second World War. A great many of them were never identified. A small part of the 9th Army reached the 12th Army and crossed the Elbe at Tangermunde in early May, where it surrendered to the American 102nd Infantry Division. The rest were killed or fell into Soviet captivity. For SS men, the latter was often a delayed death sentence. So ended the division named after January 30th, 1933, raised in the final weeks, destroyed in a forest at the moment the regime that had given it that name was itself falling apart. It bracketed the Third Reich from beginning to end in reverse order. The 32nd shows what the Waffen-SS really was by 1945. No longer an elite, by then it was mostly children and leftovers with too few weapons and no future. And it was an organization that carried 2 faces to its last breath. On one side, boys who should never have been fighting. On the other, a hardcore that had helped carry out the occupation with all the cruelty that came with it. Understand these high-numbered divisions, and you understand something about how Nazi Germany ended. It ended in a forest full of the dead under the name of the day it all began. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss anything. See you next time.